Hi, it's IBIS 130, Professor Hyman here again. Just a quick word on globalization. Why should you study globalization? Why should you study this class, IBIS 130, Globalization and Business in the 21st Century? The short answer is globalization is everywhere. Globalization is all around you. You are embedded in globalization. Embedded is a very sociological term suggesting that you're in a network, a social network that is visible. And I'm not talking about the Facebook social network, and I misspoke. I meant to say invisible. So you're in an invisible social network that is global in scope. And this is a big sentence, but it means a great deal. And let me just unpack it for a second. The network involves people you don't know, but who are doing things that affect you. And so this is also helpful in answering the question, what is global? When is something a global phenomenon? And we can answer that question by using a lot of examples. I don't know how to define global, but I know how to put my hand over my mouth and point at something that is global. So let's take an example of Shanghai area air pollution getting into the upper atmosphere and blowing over Europe and the US and creating issues for people's respiratory health in those countries. That's a very global phenomenon. It's interesting, most global phenomena have a local basis. The local basis is, in this case, Shanghai. We can also take a different approach and say, well, is it possible to go somewhere without experiencing a global phenomenon? Can I isolate myself from globalization and just try finding underwear that's not made in China? I'm not picking on China here, but it happens to be a good example. Let's talk about some other elements of globalization, and then along the way we're going to answer the question, how can I learn about how globalization affects me? And the answer to that is, well, what are you passionate about? What do you love? So if you love, let's say you love music, you might like Norah Jones, you might like The Who, an ancient group from the UK, you might like a French group, you might like a Persian group, you might like an Israeli group, you might like an Italian group, you might see what I'm saying. And the music's all different, Spanish music, wonderful music. The French love American jazz. There's another good example of kind of how things start to globalize. You see it very fast in music. And why did I say music is because many of you can relate to music, although I suspect not all of you are musicians. But again, go back to my answer about how can I detect globalism all around me, globalization all around me. And certainly one answer would be to ask another question, and that would be, what's your passion? What do you have passion about? Okay, I knew a person who, I think her major was political science, but she was a very good opera singer, and so she took a minor in music, and she kind of was still able to follow her passion as a student. I'm not saying that's something you could do. That's just an example, okay? I have a passion that's related to music. It's percussion instruments and playing drums, and I want to show you a couple of pieces of equipment and talk about the global aspects of the equipment. Hi, Professor Hyman here again. I was talking about understanding globalization and how it affects you personally by looking at your passion and taking it apart, okay? So let's look at my passion briefly. My passion, percussion, drums. I like to play drums. Now, Gallery is operating a camera, going to give her a couple instructions on what to look at, but I think you can see this drum here, and maybe you can see this drum, I don't know, it's a black drum, bass drum, tenor drum, and then I got this other one here, three drums, and these are all with the black shell. These drums were made by a fellow named D'Amico in America. They were handcrafted on a professor's salary. I can't normally afford drums that are this good, but I got these used. I found them at a used music store called The Starving Musician, which is a good name. So these were built in America, designed and built in America, these drums here, okay? They have heads. Those are these things you hit. This is the drum shell, and this is the drum head. The heads, however, are all made in China. Okay, now let's talk about the cymbals. I got a lot of cymbals here. Cymbals. Every cymbal I own is made in Turkey. Turkey is the cymbal manufacturing capital of the world. There are superb metal spinners in Turkey. This industry is centuries old, and they've been making equipment like this forever. The names are Turkish, Zildjian and Paisti. Those are two of the major brands of cymbals in the world. So it's a very global drum set. And then I have a few boutique items. I have special silencers for the drums so they don't ring out. You can't really see those from where you're looking. Those are made in Mexico. Okay? I'm recording the drums when I feel like I can play okay. I record the drums with microphones that are manufactured in China and also in Japan, and they are excuse me, they're designed in the U.S. and sold in the U.S. Here's a wind chime. This is made in Santa Cruz, California, I believe. No, I'm sorry, I've got that wrong. This is made in Nashville, Tennessee, home of country music. I've got these things. These are a very high-tech device. They're basically plastic wood blocks. They've replaced a product that used to be made out of wood that you would typically get from Mexico or an African country. And the company that designed these, invented these, is called Latin Percussion, or LP for short. They're one of the top percussion manufacturers anywhere. They're an American-based company started by a person of Latin descent who has a passion for drums of all types. So it's a very interesting mix of nationalities in here. You can also look at some of the other products. The Triangle, I have no idea where this was made, I have to admit. Most of my sound equipment was designed in the UK and manufactured overseas, probably in China, or designed in America and manufactured in China. That's the story of the world right now. So with that, I'll give you a little sample of my passion. I've never played drums professionally. I've always been an amateur, and I have gaps of years sometimes between when I play. But this gear that you see right here, I've collected over a period of about 15 to 20 years. So you don't just get into it all at once. It's a very gradual thing. But I know a lot about my passion, and I take joy in knowing about my passion. That's the point. And what's your passion? And can you unpack the globalization in your passion? And maybe that would be a good theme for a extra credit essay. So we'll think about that. All right, in the meantime, I leave you with sort of something that I like to play when I'm messing around on my drums. I make mistakes too, and that was a mistake. All right, let's try something else that's a little easier. So that was pretty interesting, I hope. Don't let the noise bother you too much. Remember, I'm not a professional drummer, never been a professional drummer, and I was kind of nervous when we were shooting that. Thanks for your understanding. And now on to my favorite topic, myself, of course. No, my biography. What qualifies me to be your professor for IBIS 130? What life experiences did I have that led up to this point? Let me give you a brief biographical sketch of me. I'm a local kid, went to high school and grew up in San Mateo, went to Stanford, got an AB in psychology, then an MS in mechanical engineering, emphasis in product design. So I'm a big design thinking oriented guy. That's what I teach my MBA students. And then after Stanford, I got a job as the software engineer for user interface at VisiCorp, which nobody's ever heard of because it was crushed like a bug by Microsoft, but we did invent the first spreadsheet. I was not on that team. I was hired after that, but I worked on spreadsheet products. It was a very interesting job. Learned a lot about prototyping and coding. Subsequent to VisiCorp, I worked at Monster Cable. And Monster Cable, you know, is a consumer electronics firm that does high-end stereo cable, but they also make the Beats headphones, or they used to. And it's a very interesting firm. I learned a ton there. I was director of business development, reporting to the CEO on that job. Also worked briefly at Contract Office Group, which was a designer and reseller of modular office systems, cubicles, to use a Dilbert term, into the Silicon Valley, which was very profitable in the 80s. And I worked at a family-owned firm called Reactor Experiments, which made shielding for exotic sources of ionizing radiation like neutrons, for those of you who are real into physics. That company was subsequently sold, and then I moved to Monster, and then subsequent to Monster, I went overseas for a couple years, did my MBA at Nyenrode, which is halfway between Amsterdam and Utrecht in the center part of the Netherlands, very wonderful district called the Randstad, and subsequent to getting my MBA in the Netherlands, which was a great experience, by the way. I can talk to you about MBA programs in Europe at some point. Come to my office hours. But subsequent to that experience, I came back to the US, did a PhD at Berkeley in business and public policy, and then came back to the Netherlands and took a job as an assistant professor, worked in that job for 4 years, came back from Maastricht, which is in the south of the Netherlands. I came back to the US and got a job subsequently at San Francisco State as an assistant professor. Now I'm an associate professor in the International Business Department, and my research interests, and this kind of connects back to design thinking, are broadly I study international aspects of innovation and creativity. More specifically, I ask questions like, how do managers and team members in particular, and teams, select good problems on which to work, problems that they can solve but will also be profitable to keep solving into, say, a product line or a line of services. So how do you select good problems on which to work? That's an underexplored area. Another question I have is, how do teams handle sudden emergent problems that unexpectedly come upon them during the course of their jobs? I do research on this using surveys. I'm very interested in this topic, and if you have some interest in it, come talk to me. We can have a chat during my office hours. I'm kind of plugging my office hours here, which are Mondays from 9 to 1 in Science 315. Okay, that's about it from here for now. We're going to have a few more short little videos like this for you throughout the semester. Try and keep it informative and transparent. You know what to do when you have a question. You send an email to bruce.a.hyman@gmail.com, or you send an email to Gowrie, whose email is on the iLearn website, or to Francisco, whose email is also on the iLearn website. Thanks very much for listening, and so long for now.